Welcome to the Practical Enneagram. Russ Hudson says about sexual fours that at their best they are profoundly insightful, humane, and unbridled in their creativity. They welcome us to embrace our messy humanity. Chimes of Russ's description were reverberating for me as I met with Dale Rhodes, a long-time Enneagram teacher based in Portland in the US. During this, for me, enlivening conversation, Dale shares about the latest form that his work takes, gathering people together to learn about Enneagram themes depicted in literature and movies. It was clear to me the ways in which this is a valuable thing to do. It's a lot easier to find a type within us than reading about it in the endless theory. As I was editing this episode, I was touched again and again by the values underlying Dale's work and his emphases. Participating in one of his groups would be an invitation toward deep empathy. His words around the value of learning in community have also really stayed with me. I hope that you enjoy spending time with this beautiful soul as much as I did. Really excited to have you here. Thank you for taking the time.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Our mutual friend, the awesome Anya V, alerted me to your teaching presence. And when I looked at your website, I knew that I had to try to get you on here because this podcast is about Enneagram applications. And you have an array of non-ordinary ways of helping people to access the wisdom of this beautiful map. So Enneagram Portland facilitates interdisciplinary experiences for a vibrant community of people exploring the 9 points of view together. Before we discuss your work there, I'd love to know when you met with the Enneagram, what that experience was like, and how you came to decide that you wanted to make the Enneagram central to your professional work, spiritual guidance work.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for asking me, and you make a four happy when you say that I do extraordinary work, not just good work, but extraordinary. I'll answer that question. When I first came to the Enneagram was probably around 1996 or 97. And I was a recent move from Chicago, where I'm from, 29 years, into Portland, Oregon. And I had joined a small spiritual exploration group of just 9 friends that were interested in the world religions and in spirituality, not just the study of religion, but the experience. And we would do spiritual field trips to the Vedanta Society. We would go and visit a Buddhist temple. We went to African-American churches, and we were interested not just in the theory, but in the experience. And that's part of my theme, I think, that's come out in my work, which I'll tell you about later, is, the study of religion is different than the experience of spirituality. Even Carl Jung said that religion is a defense against having a spiritual experience.
Wow.
Yes. And sometimes the Enneagram can be a defense. All the theory of the Enneagram can be a defense against actually having the human experience. And that's why I'm focusing less on theory than I am experience. That's my theme. Like everyone, I fell in love and got converted to the Enneagram. Like, oh, this has been what I was looking for. And my spiritual group sort of was shocked to say, oh my gosh, look at this guy. He's really found something. And it brought together so much of what I was interested in my entire life. That theme comes from being a young gay boy and knowing that I was experiencing something that other people were telling me I was not to experience, right? I'm from a fairly multicultural city. Chicago's a fairly diverse place. I also come from a fairly diverse family. We have, I have a godmother who is Latina. I have a Persian brother-in-law, and I have a nephew who is Pakistani. And all of my life, I have asked this question, why are other people seeing something so differently than me? And it went through the lens in my personal and professional life of, is this sexuality? Is this race? Is this gender? Is this religious experience? Is this culture? So I got an undergraduate degree in interpersonal communication and a minor in women's studies. They didn't have gender studies at the time. It was women's studies. And I believe I was the first man to graduate with a minor in women's studies because I wanted to understand gender and I wanted to understand what I was going through. And this is in the 80s at a state school, right? So that's kind of a long-winded answer to the fact that I've always looked through the lens of how do we have an experience and communicate it to someone else, and how can it land so that it is understood? Something we fours really care about is, can our experience be understood? That's been a theme of mine. Whether it's gender studies, sexuality studies, religious studies, in which I have a master's from a school here. And I also went to a Jewish university and have a degree in human services. The Enneagram brought it to me because it didn't have to be done in a church form. I'm really not a religious person by any means. Would have been a mistake to be a minister, because I'm not a social. Religion isn't the thing I'm interested in. It's the experience that it protects. So the Enneagram brought psychology and spiritual direction together for me. That's sort of my story about why it worked. And I did. I hit the ground running and I said, this is it. And I got certified with Helen Palmer and David Daniels in the narrative tradition, and was eventually certified with Jerry Wagner at Loyola University in Chicago, a very good teacher. And then also through Tom Condon, one of my teachers who runs a business called The Change Works. And I continue to study theory. I'm just not teaching it as much.
Yeah. Gosh, that blew my mind. I'm also with Jerry at the moment.
I'm glad the world is getting Jerry online because he's a very, very good teacher. And, you know, I wanted to mention to you, I noticed that you were studying with him. Jerry is a hero in a lot of ways in the Enneagram world, because you will find Jerry a student of many of his colleagues and teachers, and it's what makes him a great teacher. He's interested and curious, and he learns continuously from what other people are doing. And I saw him doing that, and I thought, I want to study with this guy.
I know exactly what you mean. There's a very precious non-dogma to the way I've seen him interact with students. It's actually quite remarkable given how long he's been teaching, right? That he can be that way.
And teaching undergraduates mostly too.
He is great. I should get him on here as well. I spotted in among the stuff, the MBTI. You did some work with that as well. I'm curious.
Yes.
Do you use this? Do you integrate this with the Enneagram?
I got certified in the MBTI, in the Myers-Briggs, for two reasons. One is I think it's a helpful system, and it is very popular. And I found myself at the time, years ago, wanting to teach in a broader circle, maybe in workplaces, to get the word out about the Enneagram. And the MBTI was something that people knew. But it was something that they frequently didn't remember. I would ask people, oh, so you did a Myers-Briggs workshop, what's your type? And they'd say, I'm a TMJ, which is a jaw disorder. And it didn't stick. I just found that it didn't stick. I liked the system, but I also found it to be cumbersome. And I also found it to be misunderstood, that it's really talking about preferences. So I decided the best way to understand it is to go and get certified in being able to teach it and use it. I never really did, but it gave me a bit of cred to be able to say to people, oh, well, you know, the Myers-Briggs, I teach something that might also be helpful. And of course, secretly, I'm thinking will probably be more helpful and offer, I think, a clearer way into understanding yourself. That's not for me to say that I don't think the system is a good one, but rarely am I interested in teaching them together or integrating them. They're nice background.
People know about the MBTI, you're right, and they don't know about the Enneagram.
They're owned by a press, Rez. So the reason why the MBTI is so well known is that their generator is a press that is selling product and teachings, certifications, and trainings. The Enneagram world is not owned by anyone, although I'm sure there's people who think they do own it. The Enneagram is not owned by anyone, and our professional community reaps the benefits of being interdisciplinary. But it also has the challenges that nobody owns it, and it can be like herding cats, right? But I think that's why the Myers-Briggs, it's helpful. It works in the corporate world. I think the Enneagram requires a group of people that are curious and interested about themselves and others. That doesn't always work in a workplace. Ginger Lapid-Bogda and Mario Sikora, two really, really skilled teachers and writers, I think have resources for folks when you're in an organization that is curious and open. But it'll only go so far if people are not curious and open.
Makes sense. So on to all things Enneagram Portland. So you have programs centered on learning the types through film and literature. So can you speak first to what teaching through storytelling has to offer over, learning the theory?
Yes. So it's my latest love, and I didn't really realize that I'd been doing it now for we're in our 6th year. The first 10 years of my work life with the Enneagram, it was kind of a double cycle of doing panels and bringing communities together to do panels and experiences and workshops. And then throwing in some fun nights I have colleagues that are storytellers. And I began to see there's these universal themes. You might hear the story of Midas, which is talking about being stingy or maybe being greedy. And you begin to, the longer you're with the Enneagram, begin to see them as archetypes. Yeah. And you hear the stories on panels and with your students and your colleagues of, these are archetypal themes. So I partnered with a man who is a 5. My partner's a 5, been together for about 18 years. And he is a lover of movies. And he has dragged me into more movie theaters than I would have ever chosen because I'm a reader and a musician. But over the years of watching film and of my own reading, I began thinking, why don't people get together to talk about these universal themes that come out in good art, in the visual arts, in cinema and in literature, and also in storytelling itself? Folklore, mythology, and then just people's stories. So I got some storyteller friends of mine, Norm Brecky and Ann Rutherford, both local storytellers, pretty well known in the U.S., and started partnering with them. And they began doing performances of folkloric tales from around the world that express some of what the 9 types express and care about. Gluttony is a universal theme. Impatience is a universal theme. So is envy, and so is beauty. And it began to create a community of people really interested. Another way that I began teaching this was by working with an international movement called Pachachka. It's out of Japan and comes out of the design world. And we offered 2 programs. The programs are actually on my website, enneagramportland.com. And these are 20 slides for 20 seconds each. And it is someone presenting how they see the world through 20 slides, being able to speak for 20 seconds each slide. It's a form of storytelling with visual slides. And I took to heart Helen Palmer and David Daniels and their community trust in that people want to tell their stories, and they have a way of teaching that you don't need the teacher in the front always. They can be the teacher, right? So I also came to really understand that people love story, parable, archetypes. And after all these movies that my partner made me watch, and the novels that I had collected already, I had met Judith Searle, a very good Enneagram author who wrote a book called The Literary Enneagram. I brought her to Portland and she presented, and she's a gem. I highly recommend her book, The Literary Enneagram. And another Oregonian, Tom Condon, who wrote, amongst many things, the Enneagram Movie Guide. Those 2 teachers of mine and friends gave me the inspiration to begin forming small communities of people. I call them now 9 online. But people getting together to read a book or watch a film on their own. And then they agree to meet with a classmate 1-to-1, a different classmate each month. So they have 9 classmates 9 months, 9 books and films. And then they get together in a group with me where we talk about the type and we talk about the values that are in the work of art, the book or the film. And this is one of the things I wanted to say specifically. We don't get together and talk about, for example, is Hamlet a 6? Right. And can you make a case that he's a 4 or 6? That's not what we're doing. What we're talking about is that Hamlet is an example in literature of divided loyalties and the pain that comes with divided loyalty. Mm-hmm. That is universal. It is of special importance to our friends, the 6s. To what and to whom should I be loyal is the ultimate question. Mm-hmm. Now, you also find this in a novel that I really like by Leif Enger called... I'm going to miss it because I'm over 50. I even wrote it down so I would remember. Well, one of the movies that came out called Divergent. It's a teen novel and it was made into a movie. This is another story about divided loyalties. The more you're with the Enneagram, you begin to see it isn't just 6s that care about divided loyalties. They are showing us that we all have divided loyalties. Hamlet's mother betrayed him by sleeping with his uncle and killing his father. That's the story. In Divergent, the teen novel, the question is to what and to whom should I be loyal? Myself, who I really am, or the tribe that my family has put me in? Mm-hmm. Peace Like a River is another book by Leif Enger. Mm-hmm. That's what I was trying to get in my brain. It's slower today. That is about divided loyalties and how should I betray my father to save my brother. You see this in a movie with Matthew McConaughey called Mud. As you enter the territory of these films and books, people stop talking about the theory of the 6s and they begin to find their own experience of 6. Fear, doubt, anxiety, to what and to whom should I be loyal? The pride in choosing to be loyal to something. Like in the movie Norma Ray that Sally Field won the Academy Award for, a union organizer. And Rez, what I love about this is I love all my students that they're willing to come together and do this. And of course, some of them like, dislike, or disagree about the material that we're studying. They all know they're coming at it with their own lenses, but they're changed in a positive way because they've come in saying, I'm going to learn about type 6. But they leave understanding that this is them. It's as if we've all had a collective dream, and that dream is Hamlet. And it's either a gift or a nightmare. Depending upon your experience of Hamlet, it's like, oh my God, this is me, this isn't me. But you leave saying, I can understand a 6 now because I know that I also have this experience. It brings us back to the circle of the Enneagram instead of this constant slicing and differentiation that theory leads you to.
Yeah, and it just brings it all to life as well, doesn't it? Are your students any sort of level of Enneagram knowledge that attends these groups?
In general, I say that folks should have a general understanding of the system. And also, I think that they would probably want to have a fairly general understanding of life. Most of them tend to be over 35 and 40. Okay. So they have a little bit of, I'm not my type, and you're not, you're just your type. They've been undone a little bit by life, and they begin to realize my strategy doesn't always work. Maybe I should learn about the other strategies. You know, Rez, that the beginning of Enneagram work is, oh my God, I don't want to be that. And then it's, oh my God, I am that. And then it's, oh my God, you're that. Right? That's the world of theory and it's the stage of learning. And then I think there's a different part of learning where you begin to get back to the circle of the Enneagram and you get back to life and relationships and human development. I think it also requires folks to stay in what I call the humanities. We're studying human experience. My byline on this is we're being human, not holy. Yeah. This is not going up to the holy ideas and saying, oh, the virtuous, if we could be there. We're talking about ourselves as mixed bags. The student that does these programs can sit in a community of people and we're all mixed bags. We're gold and we're challenges. And that takes a maturity. Yeah. But I love it. I have loved doing these groups. My students know I love it. And I have 80 students going through the curriculum right now. Super fun.
I can imagine the appetite for that. There's not enough of that way of learning the Enneagram. Can you share now about the work that you do in your men's groups, the 9 kinds of men? And this question in my mind about looking at the types through the lens of gender and whether that's an important thing to do.
Yeah, I think there's really good work going on in the Enneagram field on equity, diversity and inclusion. And I think that it's important that all of us take into account that there's a lot of ways that type expression is supported or thwarted based on culture, socioeconomics, race, and gender is one of those variants. I think men benefit from seeing how they are and how they can be. In Enneagram circles, it's still 70% women, 60%
really?
women, depending upon, a lot of personal growth work, which, like many people in their 50s and 60s and 70s, if you've been around the personal growth work, the world, at least in my experience, has been a very high experience of women in the community. I've been very comfortable there. It's been great, but I've looked for my brothers to share experience, and there's always fewer of them. But the Enneagram, I noticed, brought out consistently a higher percentage of men than in other spiritual circles or other areas of exploration. I think men like a practical model.
Yeah.
I think they like a rational model and something that is grounded in measurable science. And I think they like something that shows results that they can put into action. So I began to see that there's men's work that has to happen, not under the guidance of or even in the company of women. All respect in the world, I think it's good for the other side as well. I think women's circles are important, where women can explore, express, and do their community and development work their way, and men need that as well. I wanted to do this. So in my love of literature and film, I began to collect the high side role models of men in literature and film to be able to point to something and say, here's a way that this type of man expresses himself. And is that you? That's the Enneagram question. Like, is this the way that I express myself? Is this my value? And does being a man affect how I express that value, and whether that's accepted, celebrated, or thwarted? One of the movies that I use in this is a Japanese movie called Akurabitu. The English translation is Departures. And in the way that I see the movie, this is a man in a collective culture of Japan who has high values on uniqueness and beauty. He's a cellist and he loses his job. And what he does is he goes back to his childhood home where he was abandoned by his father. All of these 4 themes, beauty, abandonment, uniqueness, home, being remembered, are all present in what is a very beautiful movie that men get together to watch to talk about, is this what a man can be? And this is what this man cares about. In contrast with a movie like, what did I think that I should mention to you about? There's a movie by Jim Jarmusch called Patterson. It's about an American man in Patterson, New Jersey, who is a poet, bus driver, husband. And I believe he's expressing the pacing and the values of an Enneagram 9. And it's a way of being in the world that I think men might not be given permission, at least in American culture, to be a poet, go along, to love your wife, and go home and write poetry, and to be a member of your community. So I see these, the men really like the programs, and I see these as celebratory ways of saying, this may be who you are, and this may have something for you. If this isn't who you are, you might include this on your palette of a way of being a man. And I love it. I'm in heaven doing these groups.
I'm really touched by what you've said. So in a way, these groups, maybe it's about acceptance as well, and just being able to be who we are.
Yes. Yeah. I'm really a Daoist at heart. And I think that what these 9 types are ways. They are the way. And they are the way that has broken from 3 to 9. And then if you like to 27, right? Because I do like the instincts and the subtypes. To get people in a room and have them affirm, this is my way. This is my way. There's an Enneagram teacher. He's in Philly right now, but we know each other from connections at the Jewish school in Chicago, Howard Addison. He wrote a book on the Enneagram and the Kabbalah. He also wrote a book on interfaith spiritual direction. It's called Show Me Your Way. And I introjected that theme. He's a marvelous, I think he's an Enneagram 3. He's very good at quick, this is what I'm going to teach you. And this Show Me Your Way, the complete guide to interfaith spiritual direction. I took that on, and I think that's a big part of my theme. Can you show me your way? And can we create circles where people say, I am not that, but I can port that. I can accept that. Can we create circles where people really are curious? Oh, that's your way. And that's why the Enneagram came together for me. This is a succinct way to teach this. It is learnable, teachable, that you can get as close to somebody as possible and say, I think I might better understand how you see the world. And in what better way than to give someone a dream, a movie, or a book that they have had the experience of, and they're now walking around the world saying, I've experienced a young man in Japan missing his father, wanting beauty, and finding his way. And they've talked about it, and they've met fours, and they've understood that this is a viable way to live and a good way to live. It may not be their way, but they understand more. I just feel all the time like I'm in the presence of people that are willing to do that.
That's a beautiful thing. You like the instincts. Have you listened to Mario Sakura's new podcast, Dale? It's very overlaps with your work as well, because he, what is it? Yeah. The Enneagram in movies. He's got his own names for the instincts, which I haven't quite got my head around yet.
He does, yeah. I met Mario in Chicago at his workshop. Jerry Wagner had brought him in, flew in, because that's my hometown, and my sister, who's an Enneagram teacher in Chicago, and I went together, and I since have brought Mario to Portland. Mario's a friend and a teacher and a colleague that I respect a lot. Yeah. The way that I communicate that material is when my students, the 80 of them that are working with me this academic year, they have a self-preservation, what Mario calls nesting experience, by being at home, reading about the type. They're in their nest, they're at home, and they're having an experience of one. They also commit to having a one-on-one experience. That's the second instinct, a one-on-one experience with another classmate. So that's something they have to do once a month, is call someone up or have a Zoom with people that they haven't met before. And then they get together for a group with me where we talk about the book or the film. That's a social navigating experience. He calls this experience navigating. And they also get to get a lesson in a larger group where I do a panel. So my students will usually talk about their growing edge. Their least preferred or developed instinct is the thing they're always trying to get out of. Can I skip the one-on-ones? Oh, I didn't really read the book, but I wanted to come to the group. Or, oh, I hate, can I just watch the movie instead of reading the book? Or can I skip the panel? So everybody has an underdeveloped instinct, and they're willing to be on the growing edge every month to have to participate. I do think that we talk about characters that will show up. For example, I'm looking at my list of folks that I've used. For example, there's a novel that comes from an Oregon author, John Krakauer, called Into the Wild. Into the Wild is about a young man, probably espousing the values of 5. I want to be alone. I want to be on my own. He goes off into the woods, and people try to attach with him, and he won't attach with them. He wants to be on his own, to go up, I think, to Alaska, to be on his own. There's a lot of self-preservation themes in this. I want to be self-sufficient, which is a 5 theme, but I want to be materially self-sufficient, right? This was somebody that didn't bond one-on-one, and nor did he see the value in community. So my students will talk for a little bit, and I use it as an opportunity to talk about how this might be an instinct that shows up. I value them a lot, but I wouldn't say that I've made it a focus of my book and film groups. It's a discussion we have. It's an opportunity to teach a bit more about the character. What Mario gave me the idea to do, and thank you for pointing me to his podcast. I don't do that much, but I will listen to his because he's a very, very helpful teacher. Mario talked a lot about sort of animal metaphors, not surprising from an Enneagram 8, right? To talk about to remember that we are primates. I show animal videos now. I actually believe that any animal video that you could get off of public broadcasting will be showing you the acquiring of food and the acquiring of nest and the acquiring of physical, material safety and security. That's what animals are doing a lot of times, and so are we. And then you can change channels and you can find attracting and bonding, I believe is what Mario calls it, attracting and bonding, and the focus on me and you at the time. It can be several partners or several bonds. And then there's the getting along with others, what he calls social tribal navigating. Watch there's a show that I got addicted to called Meerkat Manor, and it's a video portrayal of these sort of groundhogs, basically, and it's narrated. But all that's ever going on is social tribal disagreements with other meerkats, one-on-one rivalries and one-on-one mating, and the acquiring of roots, nuts, places to latrine, all of that, finding the nest. So the irony is you're asking me about teaching the humanities, but the way that I teach instincts is through animals.
Yeah, I love it.
And it's humbling to remember that we are first. This gets back to the human experience. This floating around in the holy ideas, we weren't born angels. We were born primates. So it's also a spiritual experience to remember that we are born as members of this material experience of being human. And I think the instincts, a good use of the instincts is to remember that we are first animals. And I think that's a good thing. Yeah.
You've already spoken to this really in a roundabout way, but why is it important to learn this system in community, Dale, as opposed to on our own in our little ivory towers?
Right. I have on my website something that the I Ching, the translation of the I Ching that was paid for by Carl Jung, it says that there's something ponderous about the self-taught, and that what really matters is people coming together to have experience. And I really take that to heart. I think that real community requires humility, and real learning requires community, commitment, and depth over time. So, I had a teacher for a while, Bill Schaefer. I don't know if you ever came across him. He wrote a book.
I did. Yeah, and that book, book looks cool.
Roaming Free Inside the Cage, a Daoist approach to the Enneagram and a spiritual journey. Bill has only recently passed on. I was a member of the study community for a very short time in Mexico. He ceased doing one-off workshops over time, because what he came to believe is that real change and transformation happens in small communities over time in a continuous learning community. We're all together in the Enneagram field studying being human, studying human relationships. We are studying ourselves, but we're studying ourselves in relationship. Sitting at home with a book, reading about relationships is not learning relationship. It's theory of relationship. But coming together and having to be with people that are different than you. I mean, everybody comes to the Enneagram saying, oh, finally, everybody's like me. But that only lasts an hour. And then you have to go back to the workshop. That was just the break. Then you go back to the workshop and you realize, no, everyone isn't like you. And the Enneagram itself is many different kinds of people. There's a humility and an empathy that comes from making an agreement that you will study and be with over time. In the same way, I believe that love partnerships, teach you things that you don't learn elsewhere. I'm not against people being single, but what I'm saying is some of my deepest learning has been making a relationship with someone for 18 years and continually working and learning this is an other and this is a valid experience. While he's learning from me, I'm having an experience and it's valid. So when people make experiences together, I think they grow and change. I see them becoming more themselves, more empathetic and more human. I want to add something. There was, back around 1995, there was an anti-gay measure on the ballot here. And I was asked to sit on a panel as a gay person, right? And I sat next to a woman who, you recognize this language in social justice work today, where there's a lot of you hate, you're my enemy, you're not me, you must be against me, you hate me. So I'm sitting next to somebody who is wanting an anti-gay ballot measure to be passed, no gays teaching school, for example. When I said to this woman, something like, I think maybe you hate gay people, she said, I don't hate you, I'm afraid of you. Now that changed me, because I've been a gay activist since the 80s, right? That changed me. And I was ready for something like the Enneagram, because in that moment, I realized this was not my enemy. This was an adversary. And this was somebody who taught me, I don't hate you, but I am afraid of you. I can live with people that are afraid of me. All of a sudden, I could relate to this person. She was a mom protecting her children. She's a lioness protecting her cubs. I had to relate to this person through the lens of, oh, she has fear, doubt, and anxiety. I can relate to that because I have it too. It didn't not make her my adversary, but all of a sudden I couldn't live in a world where she was my enemy. We need more of that in the world, right? It tones the volume down, especially with our politics in the States. That I took that to heart, because I was changed by a human encounter. This would not have happened over Facebook. There was no Facebook. But it wouldn't have happened in writing. It wouldn't have happened if we were yelling at each other from across the room. But we had made a commitment to sit on a panel together and tell our truths. I think coming together to be human, it disarms us. Thich Nhat Hanh calls this personal disarmament.
Wow.
This coming together for practice. I want to keep participating. I'm in no way a master, but I want to continue participating and contributing to other people having that experience.
So lovely. Thank you. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah.
Can we do the favorite film, one book per type?
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
I'll tell you, I did pull out the list, and I wanted to sort of underscore, so that I don't get into arguments with people about, is, let's see, something like The Talented Mr. Ripley.
Right.
Like, does that hurt the three's feelings? Is he really a three? Our community doesn't even get into that, because we're talking about deceit. How do we all deceive, right? That's the downside of what you might see in the land of Enneagram 3. But the discussions always come back to, first of all, it is one of the best books ever written. It's psychologically amazing. The movie, not so good, beautiful actors and actresses, but the novel is a first-person narrative of someone who is deceitful and very materially, self-preservation-y oriented to get things and status. But the discussions go back to the theme of deceit in our lives, the theme of how might we deceive. So I just wanted to underscore that I make these choices to depict areas of attention and values that are of importance to a type that we're studying, but it's really about us. It's universal.
That's really important. I'm glad you've said that. So instead of the type, let's speak then as we go through them, Dale, to the theme rather than the number, shall we? Because that's better.
So you'll know where I am, Rez, but I'll just go through. But so the Brits have a lovely contribution to the conversation on relationship being helpful and connective in the book Cold Comfort Farm by Stella Gibbons. A lovely novel, and people of my generation and older in Britain will quote this book because they were frequently raised by people who would quote this book. It's a lovely fairy tale example of somebody who wakes up and says, how do I connect? How do I relate? Emma by Jane Austen also would be this movement towards how can I connect? And also the avoidance of your own needs and your own wants because you're so busy connecting. Okay, so you got the theme. You'd also see in Kiss of the Spiderwoman by Manuel Puig and King Lear also the downsides of this pride and even manipulation. In another theme, you might find that there are people that care a lot about their identity and being successful and being oriented to win. I have a hero in the man who wrote The Pursuit of Happyness, Happy, Chris Gardner. He's a very well-known coach. This is a man portrayed in the movie based on the book that he wrote, who had the identity and identification. I'm going to be a financial success. I'm going to be a good dad. I'm never going to betray my family, and I'm going to be a role model for others. This is an archetypal theme that you and I know we find in certain types that evokes, I'm a model. I want to be a model for others. On the downside, you might see people like the talented Mr. Ripley or Black Narcissus, also coming out of a British author. Or I think that's good enough. There was a movie that came out, I'll just say, because it's about, I think, our own type. If you'd like to understand a young budding four, Greta Gerwig's film Lady Bird is a very good film that someone could say, if you have a young four going through teen years, and I think all of us felt like fours as teens, probably. It's a development of someone who's trying to form an identity as unique. She won't call herself Christine. She has to call herself Ladybird. And the opening of the film is her saying to her mother, do I look like I'm from Sacramento? And her mother says, you are from Sacramento, right? And the film is all about how do I craft an identity? Very important to fours. The downside of four can show up in Henrik Ibsen's play Hedda Gabler, somebody that can be self-destructive because she can't quite have the creative, unique, beautiful life that she wants. Pairing those two films, or Woody Allen's film Blue Jasmine, can be a really interesting look at what we might call high side, low side, but we're all a spectrum. I'm particularly a big fan because my best friend is my sister, who's a 5, and my partner's a 5. So I have lots for 5s, but I will say that I'm warmed by Lars and the Real Girl, a movie with Ryan Gosling. Also Silas Marner, a novel about a recluse who got hurt and decided that he had to go inside. That's written by George Eliot, a fantastic author. And Silas Marner is a universal story about someone who got hurt and overwhelmed and moves away and inside, and then life comes and gets him. It's actually the same story as Lars and the Real Girl. He is somebody who gets hurt, is overwhelmed, and he invites life, and life kind of intrudes upon him and gets him. These are universal themes. People begin to see these themes in other stories, but I like presenting them with one or two. I've already mentioned Divergent as a good look at divided loyalties around the content maybe of Type 6. Hamlet. I'm a big fan of that book, Peace Like a River by Leif Enger. There's a novel that I used for Type 7 called Housekeeping by Marilyn Robbins. And then I look at Harvey Milk, who was a gay rights activist, the first openly gay city official elected in the United States and assassinated. I think Sean Penn's portrayal of him in Milk is a really good look at 7. True Grit is a good look at Type 8. Also, the movie 3 Billboards with Woody Harrelson and Frances McDormand. Another movie called The Blind Side with Sandra Bullock. She plays a lot of 8 characters. A feminist novel for Type 9 called The Stone Diaries by Carol Shields. It's about a woman who isn't in her own life. The Stone Diaries. It's amazing. It's beautiful, beautiful literature. And then, as I mentioned, the movie Patterson. And then for Type 1, there's a popular book out a couple of years ago, A Man Called Ove. Swedish film and a really fun book. And, the downside could be a look at maybe the British novel Remains of the Day by Kazuo Ishiguro. So those are the kind of films and novels. And sometimes people have to read a novel, or sometimes they can do the film, or we have them watch the film on purpose. But that gives you the wide range. You can see I do like a pretty diverse.
How am I going to make my way through all of those? That I really want to read the 9. What the woman who wasn't inhabiting her life.
Carol Shields is an amazing author. Yes, she was actually born in Chicago, I believe, but she married the finance minister of Canada in Ottawa, and she came to identify as Canadian. She is an excellent feminist author who writes about women, their daughters, friendship, and writing. Own Diaries is a beautiful novel about a woman's life, all told through everyone else, which is how a lot of nines would feel until they wake up and say, oh, I'm in my own life.
Do you started with 2? Is that what you do, Dale, when you teach? And why do you do that?
I started with 2 and went all the way through to 1 because I think I was taught by Helen Palmer and David Daniels. I was around when they were still, teaching in their training programs. These triads are important. I really view the triads as integral to how we develop and what we want and maybe where we get stuck. If you're trying to understand 2s, 3s, and 4s, they are more sensitive to grief, being sad, and being hurt. What I say to people is that, if you have a 2, a 3, or a 4 partner, their identity is going to matter more, maybe than for others, and they're more susceptible to being hurt emotionally. 5s, 6s, and 7s are interested in predictability, safety, and security, and really are more future-oriented in the way that I experience them. They are more likely to be scared. You are more likely to scare them, to make them anxious. And 8s, 9s, and 1s, I think, are more likely to be concerned about, do I matter? What matters? What will be the effect of us being here? Am I even here? Am I here? And I think that they're more sensitive to being forgotten, to being visible or invisible. And I also think that they're more sensitive to wondering, what do I do with force and anger? So I don't like calling them anger types, fear types, emotional types. Just these are areas of sensitivity. Am I more likely to be hurt? Am I more likely to be scared? Am I more likely to feel out of control or not know what matters or insist upon mattering? So that wheel is teachable. And sometimes it's good to just teach the triad before you get into the 9 types. It makes it bite-sized. So that's how I view the Enneagram, 2 all the way through 1.
Thank you so much for all of this.
It's a pleasure.
Such a beautiful interview. I'm so excited to make it and listen to it again, actually. Yeah.
Hope that you enjoyed hearing from Dale as much as I did. My next victim is my dear teacher from Integral Coaching Canada, Steve Beckett, who talks to me, among other things, about being a teacher and a coach from the Enneagram 5 perspective. Do subscribe and rate the podcast if you are enjoying it.